Hello again, Year 6. So this is the third and final lesson that we've created for you from the English department at Heath Lane Academy. And this one's going to focus on your creative writing. So we've previously looked at understanding the story of the Trojan War and obviously the Iliad and how it links to what you're going to study in Year 7, the Odyssey. We've looked at annotation skills and analysis skills and talked about their importance. So another really important aspect of English is obviously writing and being able to write creatively or write to argue, persuade, write to give instructions, write to give advice. So you'll be asked to look at how we write in different ways. But for today, we're going to focus on creative writing, which can mean like description or story writing. Okay. So, for your do now, I'd like to look at this image, and I'm hoping you recognise this as an image of the Trojan horse from the Trojan War that we've been discussing. So you'll see you've got the giant horse in the middle made of wood, and then you've got all of the Spartans would be inside it, and then you've got all of the Trojans who have welcomed it into their city, which would be a walled city, and they've let it in thinking it's a peace offering, a gift. So they're all pulling it in because it's on wheels, and it's obviously just before the Greeks are about to burst out of the horse to attack and cause the fall of the city of Troy. So for your do now, what I would like you to do is there's 3 questions at the side here of this picture. So on a piece of paper or on the worksheet, can you write 3 adjectives you would use to describe this scene? So for example, you might describe the Trojan horse as colossal or large. You might consider how you would describe the crowd. So try and think about 3 adjectives describing words. Number 2, can you create a simile to describe something in the scene? So remember, a simile is where you compare one thing to another for effect using the words like or as. So think about what you might want to compare something to in this scene. And then finally, number 3, what might you be able to hear? Because when we do piece of creative writing, we really use all of our senses to set the image and create a picture for the reader. So a really good book, think about it, allows you to see, hear, taste, touch, smell, everything is there. So focusing on what we might hear at this point, and if you can you use some onomatopoeias? So remember, onomatopoeias are words that sound like the word they're describing. So bang, crash, crackle, hiss, any of those sorts of words. So if you have 5 minutes and share some of those with your teacher of what you could use, and then you will be able to use those in your piece of creative writing that you're going to have a go at after this introductory few slides. So have a go. Okay, ladies and gents, so hopefully you had some fantastic ideas for adjectives, onomatopoeias, similes, and you've really wowed your teachers or your parents with those, so well done. You'll be using those in a moment, but let me explain what the task is that I'm going to ask you to do, and also let you know a little bit about how it links to GCSE. Now, I know you're nowhere near GCSE yet, but we always need to be thinking about what we're doing and why we're doing it and where it might lead. So what you would have at GCSE is you would get an image on one of the language papers, and you're asked to write either a description suggested by the picture or a short story. And obviously it's under exam conditions, but don't worry about that. That's not going to happen today. And you would use this image and you would have to think about all your creative language choices. So your similes, your metaphors, personification, what adjectives you might use, what verbs you might use, how you might use fronted adverbials, how you might use your sentences. So your clauses and your sentence structures, all for effect to make a really good story or piece of descriptive writing. And I'm sure you have done lots on that and you know what I mean. Imagine picking up a book and then not wanting to put it down because it's so amazing. That's been crafted. It's been consciously put together by the writer. You need to do that in your own writing. So the task that you have in front of you gives you a choice. So it's saying using this picture as a stimulus, which means to get your ideas going and get you thinking and those creative juices going, You can write a description suggested by the image, or write a short story either from the perspective of a Trojan receiving the gift, so somebody in the crowd there maybe, or from the perspective of a Greek who will be sitting inside this wooden horse ready to attack the Trojans who think that it's all over and that they've won and this is a peace offering. So you've got two options. What I want to do on the next slide is just show you a little bit of information about what is the very subtle difference between a description and a short story. And then after that, there's a couple of slides with some examples on, which I'll talk about briefly, but we won't have the time to go through and read them all. But your teachers might want to go through those with you in a little bit more detail, or you might want to read them in a bit more detail to help you with your task. The other thing to be aware of is that this task, we decided in the English department that it'd be great to see some of your work. And so if you want to, so it's not that you must, it's not a summer homework at all, but if you want to, the task that you start in school, if you don't finish this creative writing task in school and you want to complete it at home, you can email it to me so that we can choose the 3 best ones, and that means that they've grabbed our attention, they're using creative writing really well, they're really thinking about how they put it together, your spelling, punctuation and grammar is really good. We're going to be looking for the 3 best across the whole of the new year 7, so it's quite a big competition, not just those coming from your primary school, and we're going to get some prizes for the top 3. So if you do want to email me, I will pop the email address on the last slide and a little bit more information about this competition. So make sure you take a note of it. And then when in September you're all here with us, once we've got a few handed in, we'll have a deadline date. You might be one of the lucky winners. If you're not a lucky winner, we're going to, with the help of the librarian, create a display or a little collection in a booklet for you that will stay in the library as well. So good luck if you want to enter the competition. It does need to be either scanned or typed, your final version, and emailed to me, because we can't obviously be passing too many bits of paper around due to COVID, and also if it's sent during the holidays, etc., there won't be many people in school to receive it. So if you can email it me when it's done and you want to take part, that would be fab. So let's have a look at the next few slides. Okay then, year 6. I nearly called you year 7 then, but you know what? You nearly are, so year 7. So what this slide is all about is how you plan your response. And you'll see there's 2 little headings because there's a very subtle, which means like a small difference between writing a description and a narrative, a story. So first of all, we're going to look at description. So there are 6 bullet points. So as I say each one, you will need to press the button on your mouse or your keypad to move that on. So the first bullet point, if you press the button, a description, it stays firmly fixed in the image, so you can't move backwards or forwards in time, not like a story where you can create what's happened the previous week, or you can move forward to the following year. A description stays in that particular picture. So if you choose a description, you've got to stay in that Trojan horse scene. You can't talk about what's happened previously in the war or what happens afterwards. You can write it in first or third person, so you can write it first person, I, me, we, our, as if you're there, or you can write it as if like you're just looking in third person, so the Greeks, the Trojans, the horse, the city, and you're looking at it and you're not in it, part of the action. So if you press the next bullet point, the idea of a descriptive piece of writing is to create a really vivid image in the reader's head. So if I hadn't got this image and I read your description, I should be able to kind of see that in my head. So when you read a book, you read that descriptive piece within the story, within that book, and you can imagine that house, that character, that scene, that forest, whatever it may be, because of the language that's used. So that's the purpose of a descriptive piece, to really get the reader to see that image, almost like I could draw it from your picture. From your writing. Next bullet point then. Try and include all the senses where possible. So consider what you can see, obviously, what you might taste, touch, what you might smell, what you might hear. And some might not be that obvious. But for the smell, for example, in the Trojan horse one, it might not be the most obvious, but you might smell like the wood or the heat or the sand. The taste, you might taste the dust as it's been kicked up from the floor as the horse has been pulled in, or the excitement of people rushing about. And you might smell the sweat and the heat. So think about how you can really set the scene. Next bullet point, and this one's really important. Show, don't tell. The best pieces of descriptive writing are suggested through you showing the reader what you want them to see, rather than saying there was this, there was a horse, there were people, they were in a city, it was hot, it was cold, whatever. Think about how you suggest it and show the reader. Don't just tell us exactly what's there. So if you press the next bullet point, think about planning your structure. So how you put it together. So if I was planning to write about this Trojan horse and writing a descriptive piece, I might start with like the whole image and describe like the city and the crowd and the horse. Then I might zoom in on a certain person or the horse or someone's feelings. And then I might return back to the big picture. So you're a little bit like a camera person on a film or a TV show. You know where they zoom you in or pan you left or right so that you see certain things? You're doing that through your writing. So think about that. Finally, for description, use language and sentence structures to keep us interested. Don't start all your sentences with the noun or a noun phrase. So don't start with the horse, the Greeks, the Trojans, it was, the sun, the floor. Think about how you use your sentences and how you connect them as well. So start with those adverbial clauses. Think about how you change them around, shorter, simple sentences or more complex descriptive sentences. And I know you'll have done some work on that in Year 6, but I'm sure that your teachers will be able to help you if you're doing this in school. So how does that differ from a narrative then to a story? Okay, so if you press your button, first bullet point that appears, the idea is that in the GCSE exam, you don't have very long to write this. So you don't have time to write like a whole novel, a whole play, a whole script, a whole story. So try and focus on keeping it as simple as possible. So one character, one idea. Don't overcomplicate it. Think about your story arc or your story mountain when you plan and you have your beginning, middle and end, or you have your opening, your development, your sort of crisis, you know, the thing that happens that's the most significant piece, and then how that's resolved. But don't overcomplicate it by trying to do too much. Second bullet point, if you press the mouse again. This can be written in first or third person again. So you could be telling a story from the point of view of someone inside the horse or someone receiving the horse, or you could just be somebody telling a story, watching the whole thing unravel in front of you. Third bullet point, consider how you plan your narrative. How are you going to keep the reader engaged? What are you going to start with? Are you going to start right in the middle of the action and then explain how we get there? Are you going to leave loads of questions for the reader wanting to read on, making us want to know more? Are you going to start with a short descriptive sentence that really grabs our attention and builds a bit of tension and makes us want to carry on? So think about that. Next bullet point. Use language, dialogue, sentence structures for effect. So in this one, you can have dialogue because you can have characters that you create that can have a conversation so they can speak to each other, unlike in your description. You might hear voices in the descriptive piece, but you can't have a full-on conversation. Remember to use your speech punctuation properly if you're going to do that. Okay, next one then. Consider and how and when you want to reveal details to the reader. You are planning this story, and a good blurb And a good trailer for a movie leaves you wanting more. So a good opening to a book or a short story doesn't tell you everything. So consider how you're going to give clues to things but leave things unanswered, as well as where it leads to for that resolution of your story. The last two then, so the final ones, will you start at the end of the story? Will it be cyclical? Will it be chronological? So how are you going to structure this story? Are you going to start at the end and then explain through your story how we got there? Is it going to start at the beginning and it's going to happen as it happens? Are you going to flick backwards and forwards in time? It's entirely up to you. And then the final one, how will you resolve it? How are you going to end it? Will there be a cliffhanger? Will there be some sort of resolution that works out well or negatively? That's entirely up to you. I hope that has made a little bit of sense, okay? So on the next two slides, we're going to look at a couple of examples to help you. These are also available for you to print out if you want them, or you can go through them a little bit slower and with your teachers or on your own and reread them before you have a go at your own story or description. Okay, Year 7, I'm going to call you that from now on. These two examples on this slide here are descriptive examples. So like we said on the previous slide, these will stay in the picture. There won't be a story, there won't be a plot or characters that we know about, what their families are like, how they talk to each other. We won't have that. They stay in the moment. So I'm going to read one of them through and just talk about what's good about it. But then the other one you can look at in your own time. Okay. So I'm going to read through the one on the left as you look at the slide. And this one is written to describe from a third person point of view, looking in at what's going on. The one on the right hand side is a first person point of view description, and it's from the point of view of somebody inside the horse, whereas this one is just looking at the whole picture. Okay, listen up. Imposing, dominant, empowering. The colossal wooden creature emerged through the city's gates and was met by huge crowds of people, welcoming such a spectacle into their walls. A mixture of astonishment and awe echoed amongst the crowds as they embraced the unusual sight before them. Towering well above the monuments, pillars and temples of the city, the wooden sculpture loomed over the ant-like people at its feet. Its power and strength exuded from every inch of its carefully crafted body. The smell of well-oiled wood drifted through the air, enticing the crowds closer and closer to its magnificence. They were entranced by its beauty, unable to move. With a glazed look of admiration etched upon their faces, the crowd were hypnotized by the glorious sight of the sun bouncing off the back of the creature, illuminating their childlike faces. People gathered everywhere, on the walls of buildings, in temple doorways, surrounding its feet. Those lucky to be close enough could feel the smooth craftsmanship and hard work that had been poured into creating such an awe-inspiring sight. Now, I wrote that as an example of a descriptive piece, and some of it might seem a bit complicated, but as an idea, what it clearly does is describes the scene. It's got a use of different senses in, so it talks about what we can hear with the crowds of people, talks about what can be seen with the sun and the childlike faces because they're so excited, so it creates that mood. It's using some sentence structures differently. So it starts with those three words at the top on their own in their own one-line paragraph, which is really, really effective to then describe the horse. The colossal wooden horse, the use of the adjective colossal. Try and think of synonyms for certain words. So don't just say the big horse or the large horse. Colossal makes it sound really, really massive. It makes it sound really powerful as well. Consider how you can use different techniques, for example, in your writing. And the idea that the crowd embrace the unusual sight is a metaphor. They're not literally putting their arms around it and hugging it, but they're happy to see it. So that's just one example, and you might want to go through that a little bit more to help you. And you can use some ideas from that in your own, but obviously we are looking for your own piece of creative writing. So as a descriptive piece, there's loads to use just there. So if we move on to the next slide, we've got a narrative, a story piece to look at. Okay then, ladies and gents, this is the last slide that we're going to look at before you can have a go at your own piece of writing. And it's really important you plan, and the sheet will hopefully help you with some planning. I've put a few bits and bobs in place to try and help you. And remember, if you want to enter the competition, the very last slide and on the worksheet will have my email address so that you can send your final descriptive or narrative piece about this picture to us so that we can judge them. So if we read the one on the right this time, starting with the dialogue, the speech, what is it? Okay, so I'm going to read it through. What is it? It's huge. Where did it come from? Why is it here? Crowds gathered around the huge sculpture as it was slowly pulled into the fortified city of Troy. Cheers and shouts echoed around. Mingled and mixed up words of confusion and excitement bounced off every stone wall and pillar in the main square. The beauteous, brave figure of Paris carved his way through the crowds to the foot of the wooden creature that loomed above him, his presence commanding at once for the crowds to be silenced. Silence. The previously raucous crowds gazed in awe at their leader, worshipping him like a god. Raising his sword triumphantly, whilst his panther hide lay with pride upon his shoulders, Paris let out a huge cry. Victory! The throng of people returned his cry with a resounding cheer and applause. Silencing the crowds once more, Paris spoke. This wooden horse before us is a gift from the Greeks, our enemy, as a sign of peace and acceptance that we are the stronger army. Another triumphant cheer raised into the air. Raising his arm to silence the crowd once again, Paris continued. This gift represents our victory in the bloody, violent and endless war that we have endured these past 10 years. We are victorious. An almighty boom once more erupted from the crowd. Okay, so this is only the opening of a story, but what I've used here that's different to the description is I've got some dialogue. I've obviously got a character with Paris, and I've got him speaking as well as some description about him. I've also tried as well to use some one-word or one-line sentence paragraphs, again. By building up through the speech of what Paris says and the crowd keep cheering and him silencing him, it builds the image for us in our head of what's going on in this story. But if you imagine this story carried on, we know that this is not victory for the Trojans, so it sets up this idea of tension and suspense. And ultimately, if I'd carried on writing this, I'd probably have a sudden breakout of the Greeks coming out of the wooden horse and a battle being described and what would happen next. So I've really built up a bit of mystery and tension as well of what's going to happen, this sort of false sense of security that Paris feels content and as if he's won, and so do the crowd. And then all of a sudden there's going to be a quick switch and a change in this story. So if you want to have a go at this, the information is on the last slide. I want to just take the opportunity to say thank you very much for listening to all of these lessons. I really look forward to seeing you next year when you start with us. And I'm really excited to see some of these stories or descriptions when they get emailed to me. So good luck. Have a fantastic summer holiday. We definitely need a break. I'm sure your teachers would agree with me. And we will see you when you come in for the start of year 7, if not before, if you are able to attend the transition days that we've got planned in July. So take care, good luck, and I look forward to seeing you all next year.